Hello. Happy Wednesday. Here's a puppy. A puppy to start the stream. It's you, Ben. Do you see yourself? That's you up there. You and me. He's looking at the screen where he is. Good boy. Hello, Sharkies. I also see a Robot Kyo in chat. I haven't seen Robot Kyo for a bit. Well, actually, just saw Robot Kyo on Sunday. Yeah, it was Sunday, right? That's when we ran the game. Benepic reads. Ah, the Sharkies say bark, bark, bark. Bark, bark. Yeah. Oh, hair is kind of wild today. I slept in quite late today, personally. And I think tonight I may just end up not sleeping and try and sleep at a very early time tomorrow night to try and sort of flip my sleep schedule around. I need to do that occasionally because otherwise I end up just being awake all night and then sleeping all day. That's how my body wants to function, but I don't like it. So every now and then I try and fix it. And sometimes it works for a while. Sometimes I'll have like a few weeks of sleeping at more normal times, and then it starts to shift. I can tell, it'll be like, oh, I didn't fall asleep until 1 o'clock last night. That's not a good sign. And then it'll be 2 o'clock, and then it'll be 3 o'clock. My eyes are kind of sore. It started raining here again. Apparently, we are in for we've got a rainfall warning in effect for tonight through Friday. It's not supposed to be as severe as the last big event, as they called it, from the 13th through 15th, but it could make existing flooding worse, which is bad. Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, it's not supposed to be as bad, but it's on top of what we've already had, so it doesn't need to be as bad, unfortunately. But yeah, I hope that, maybe we just get lucky and maybe it doesn't make things horribly worse. Farmo says we've been having a dog hair flood in our house. Yeah. Yeah. Binibon Bean is shedding right now. He sheds basically year round, but right now he's shedding, like getting his winter coat in, and there is fur everywhere. I'm like, I sit down on the couch and there's fur in the air and there's fur in my mouth. There's fur on everything I'm touching. So if I want to get the fur out of my mouth, I'm like, no, there's fur on my hands. It's a little bit of a mess. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, ran our D&D game again on Sunday. I feel like I've been doing a lot of D&D recently. We started this game, like we did a session 0 like a week before Halloween. Then we did our first session on Halloween, and since then we've played a total of 2 more times after that. And we're not out of November yet, so we've been playing pretty frequently actually, compared to how our groups frequently have gone in the past, historically. But that said, it's also, I so they started off, my group started off by, they found themselves inside this misty forest, and then they found a road and went through some gates which closed behind them, and then they found this manor house with these two kids being like, help, there's a monster in the basement and our baby brother is trapped upstairs. And so our intrepid adventurers went into Durst Manor. And I didn't expect. I don't know. I expected the manor to take longer than it does for some groups because I know, like, our players, my friends, all like to roleplay a lot. So I was expecting it to be a bit slower, but it's taken like 3 long sessions and they're still trapped inside. Like on Sunday, we played for like 10 hours this time, and that's not too far off from how the other sessions have gone, but we're still in there. Robot Kyo says it's been going well so far. Well being as good as can be for horror, but we're quite enjoying it. And Farmo says it's been a bit of an emotionally intense game. We're all like, okay, we're going to be really careful going into every new room for fear of dangers. But no one in our party has died. Now, some of you have come close, but honestly, your cautiousness, I'm sure, is paying off in that some of the things could have gone worse than they have. I think it would have been possible to have character deaths already at this point, but we have managed to avoid that so far. Benedict hair gets in my hair. But yeah, so last session, they're in the basement, which is sort of a dungeon underneath this house, and so they were exploring that. Rapakio says, I feel like it's been a mix of good fortune, planning, and a little GM generosity. What? No, it's all you guys. I am a neutral party. Yeah, last time they were exploring the dungeon basement level. There were a few fights. Some ghouls, a was it a carrion crawler? Or no, it wasn't a carrion crawler. It was, I forget the name of that horrible tentacly thing that, it was? Paralyzed one of our party members for a good portion of the fight, and I think he got dropped to 0 hit points, but then got healed back up. The ghouls paralyzed someone, but I think it was our druid who was in beast shape at the time. And beast shape in 5th edition is pretty nice because you get the hit points of your form on top of your other hit points, your character's hit points, so it allows you to be a bit of a sponge. For damage. And then eventually they didn't thoroughly explore this dungeon because they were like, we just want to get out. So they were following this like ghostly chanting. I think they all sort of assumed that if they found the source of the chanting, they'd be able to break the curse on this place and actually be able to escape because they've been kind of locked in. And so they just sort of found the shortest path possible to get to that, which led them to this big room with water in it and a big altar that was covered in blood and chanting ghostly figures that basically demanded that one of them must be sacrificed on the altar. Of course, the party was just like, nope, and tried to leave, and at which point they got attacked by a... what's the word for it? Gibbering mouther. Yeah. Farmo says, there was a time when we were like, yeah, explore, but there's just been too much. No more, just trying to get out now. Yeah, they've been through quite a lot in this place. The Gibbering Mouther had an awful lot of effect on Robot Kyo's character, who kept failing will saves and either getting frozen in place, or at one point he just took off running away from the party. And so they managed. It was pretty entertaining because they go into this place, which was the entrance was blocked by a portcullis, and so the stronger members of the party lifted the portcullis up, and then they found on the other side that there was a wooden wheel that you had to turn to to open and close it. And one of our party members had been collecting chair legs. They'd found some chairs, and this character had broken legs off of the chairs. And then, so for some reason, I don't know why. I think it was initially to make torches, but there kind of became a joke of this character just collecting chair legs as a hobby. So the party took 3 of these chair legs and jammed them in the wooden wheel, which, to operate to keep the portcullis open. But this worked against them when the gibbering mouther attacked, and they all tried to run out of the room, but the portcullis was jammed open. Sharky say, for some reason my brain thought I was starting to say the door was blocked by a proctologist. That is not the type of adventure we are running, no. Actually, let me just show off a little something from the game. Here we have the room with the sacrificial altar and my stand-in for the gibbering mouther, because I didn't actually print that off. I probably could have, but I don't know. Just running out of time and didn't plan that far ahead, I guess. And here's the portcullis. Our altar, which, maybe it would have been a little cooler if I had the time to paint it, but it's still kind of neat. Doesn't want to focus right now. That's fine though. You get the idea. I was expecting a big fight in this room, but they all ran out of it. But I thought the actually having the portcullis had a little bit of added effect. So that was fun. But yeah, so they jammed these chair legs in the wheel that held the portcullis open. And then when they tried to escape, they realized that the portcullis wasn't going to close behind them because it was jammed open. So this gibbering mouther, which actually had quite a slow move speed, was slowly chasing them out of the room. And one of the characters, the one that was collecting the chair legs, he grabbed the top of the portcullis and heaved on it, but only rolled a strength check of 11. So one of the chair legs snapped, and the portcullis dropped, but then stuck on the next chair leg. And the gibbering mouther crept closer and was spitting things at them. So they ran further back, and then were casting spells at it, which had an area of effect, hoping that would break the chair legs. And so another one broke, and it dropped a little further, but then got stuck again, and the gibbering mouther is creeping underneath. And just as it gets underneath the portcullis completely, they manage to break the third leg, which drops it on the gibbering mouther. And then at that point, they sit there blasting it with whatever magic they've got, because we've got both a warlock and a druid, who both have ranged cantrips that they can use for attacks. And so they're sitting there blasting it, and I'm keeping track of the hit points, and I'm like, it's not moving anymore. It stopped gibbering. And they're still just hitting it. And I think they overkilled it by about 40, maybe 45 hit points. Just kept blasting it. And I feel like that's been a little bit of a theme in this party so far, is if you see anything you don't like in this place, blast it with magic until you can't see it anymore. Some of Benebic's fur is drifting across my vision here. So that was an entertaining battle at the bottom of this place, supposedly the bottom, the furthest down they've reached, anyways. But they still haven't actually been able to escape. We had to stop there because it was like midnight on Sunday, and people had to work in the morning. Robot Kyo says, "Shoot first, ask questions later. We tried the questions first. It hurt." Farmo says, "Eldritch Blast, D&D pest control." A little bit more than that since you got the agonizing blast. That warlock, like just at level 2, is putting out a lot of damage. I was surprised. Although our cleric cast Guiding Bolt, which did 4d6 damage, and rolled 2 5s and 2 6s, and so that was a large number as well in at the beginning of that fight. Farmo says, "We're coming up on really big pests. I see. That's what you mean by pest control, huh?" Let's see. So what has Robot Kyo missed out on? I don't remember the last time you were here, so I'm not sure where you are at in the book. But that whole summoning the dragon thing was happening, and then they brought in their Patsy King to slay the dragon, and they banished it away. But then the dragon re-summoned itself. It found its way back on its own, followed the magic. Um, Killed a bunch of people, including the would-be king. And before killing the High Priest of Blind Io, the High Priest tried to bribe it with the crown. So the dragon decided that that made it king and trotted off to the palace. Um, Vimes got, let's see, figured out that the head of the Supreme Grand Master of the elucidated Brethren of the Ebon Knight was actually one Lupin Wantz, the patrician's assistant, and so tracked him down and got thrown in the special dungeon for the trouble of it, which is where the patrician happened to be. Seems that the patrician was advising the rats of the dungeon, helping them to win out against the scorpions and snakes, and maybe one other. Was there something else as well? I'm not sure. And in return, the rats were providing for him, bringing him whatever food stuffs from the kitchen and a random assortment of books, since they can't read. Ah, Robot Kyo says, "Oh, the rats bit, that was one of your favorite little moments." Yeah, the patrician in the dungeon, and it kind of seemed like, despite appearances, he might be sort of basically in control there. Vimes was trying to dig his way out of the dungeon by chipping away at the bars or the mortar around the bars, but then the librarian showed up and just basically pulled the bars out of the window grill and then pulled Vimes out. And off they ran to try and rescue Lady Ramkin, who was chained up to a bit of rubble to be sacrificed to the dragon. Meanwhile, the rank of the Night Watch were up on a rooftop, deciding that it was a 1,000,000 to 1 shot, but they might just be able to hit the dragon and its vulnerables as it flew past. Unfortunately, they only succeeded in pissing it off, and also, unfortunately, they were on top of a distillery, so when the dragon breathed fire at them, the whole place exploded. And I think that's roughly where we're at now, is we've got Vimes and Lady Ramkin facing down a pissed-off dragon that's got bits of distillery stuck in it because it was also caught in the blast. Oh, and also the little swamp dragon Errol has been eating a lot of very volatile things and seeming very sick and was covered in frost. I think Vimes speculated that he was trying to make himself a very hot flame because he wants to battle the noble dragon. But the last we saw of Errol, he was still in kind of rough shape. Yeah, I think that covers the really significant bits. That was a pretty good summary, I think. If I just cover this up, will it refocus better? Yeah, it looks like it may be focused up a bit. A little. I'm back here. Look at me. This is my face. I use my hand as a bounce for the light. No. Whatever. Yeah. Did I miss anything? We had a fun bit in the D&D game where the characters all decided they needed to take a long rest, despite not wanting to spend any time in this place and really not thinking they were going to be able to get much rest. So I had them earn their long rests by describing the nightmares their characters had to me, and I thought that was fun. That a little bit of revealing some of their fears out loud, their characters' fears. I thought everyone did a good job of that. Sharky say, Carrot grabbed Nobby and Colin as the building blew up under them. Robot Kyo says, Izzy thought that was a cool move, the nightmares bit. That's good. I'm glad that was appreciated. I thought it was good. I thought that, I don't know, sometimes, even if you're not going to explain details of your character's past in character, like if your character's not willing to share some of that, it's still fun to have the other players get a glimpse at some of that. And so I thought that was kind of a fun thing with that is, you know, even if your characters weren't going to reveal that about themselves, at least the other players kind of, you know, getting a glimpse is entertaining. Yes, they spent a bunch of time prior to shooting the dragon speculating about the depth of the water pool below them. And Carrot grabbed the two, but Vimes thinks that they're all exploded at this point. Oh boy, it's 7:20 already. I did more talking there than I thought. It always catches me off guard. So we are on page 359 out of 412. We have very little to go before we have to pick something new to read. I am very curious how that's going to go. What people want to hear. Because I feel like there were a few close... Okay, I feel like there were a few candidates last time that people were interested in, but guards just won out, and so everybody ended up voting for guards. And if guards hadn't been an option, I'm wondering what it would have been, or what would have been second place. And whether that will still be what we choose as first place next time, or if we're just going to move straight on to the next Terry Pratchett book, and suddenly this is just going to turn into reading the Guards series or something. Alright, well, have a drink of water first. So where we left off with Vimes and Lady Ramkin facing off with the dragon and basically having given up hope. Vimes thinking that he doesn't even have the energy to run away, and Lady Ramkin holding his hand and saying, "Jolly well done, it nearly worked." Charred and blazing wreckage rained down around the distillery. The pond was a swamp of debris, covered with a coating of ash. Out of it, dripping slime, rose Sergeant Colin. He clawed his way to the bank and pulled himself up, like some sweet sea-dwelling life form that was anxious to get the whole evolution thing over with in one go. Nobby was already there, spread out like a frog, leaking water. "Is that you, Nobby?" said Sergeant Colin, anxiously. "It's me, Sergeant." "I'm glad about that, Nobby," said Colin, fervently. "I wish it wasn't me, Sergeant." Colin tipped the water out of his helmet and then paused. "What about young Carrot?" he said. Nobby pushed himself up on his elbows, groggily. "Dunno," he said. "One minute we were on the roof, next minute we were jumping." See Puppy in the background there. Whoa, I'm way out of focus. What's going on? Do I need to clean my camera lens or something? Eesh. Oh. I only noticed because I saw a puppy in the background there, and I was like, "Ooh, look at that puppy!" And then I realized I couldn't really look at that puppy. All right. Next minute we were jumping. They both looked at the ashen waters of the pond. "I suppose," said Colin slowly, "he can swim." "Dunno. He never said. Not much to swim in up in the mountains, when you come to think about it," said Nobby. "But perhaps there were limpid blue pools and deep mountain streams," said the sergeant hopefully. "And icy tarns hidden in hidden valleys and that. Not to mention subterranean lakes. He'd be bound to have learned. In and out of the water all day, I expect." Just let's get really descriptive about these mountain waters, and it's bound to be true. They stared at the greasy gray surface. "It was probably that protective," said Nobby. "Perhaps it filled with water and dragged them down." Colin nodded gloomily. "I'll hold your helmet," said Nobby, after a while. "But I'm your superior officer." "Yes," said Nobby reasonably. "But if you get stuck down there, you're going to want your best man up here, ready to rescue you, aren't you?" "That's reasonable," said Colin eventually. "That's a good point." "Right then." "Drawback is, though..." "What?" "I can't swim," said Colin. "How did you get out of that, then?" Colin shrugged. "I'm a natural floater." Their eyes, once again, turned to the dankness of the pond. Then Colin stared at Nobby. Then Nobby, very slowly, unbuckled his helmet. "There isn't someone still in there, is there?" said Carrot, behind them. Ormo says, "Wow, Colin has an active imagination about dwarven mountain life." Dwarfish? Dwarfish mountain life? They looked around. He hoiked some mud out of an ear. Behind him, the remains of the brewery smoldered. "I thought I'd better nip out quickly, see what was going on," he said brightly, pointing to a gate leading out of the yard. It was hanging by one hinge. "Oh," said Nobby weakly. "Jolly good." "There's an alley out there," said Carrot. "No dragons in it, are there?" said Colin suspiciously. "No dragons, no humans. There's no one around," said Carrot impatiently. He drew his sword. "Come on," he said. "Where to?" said Nobby. He'd pulled a damp butt from behind his ear, and was looking at it with an expression of deepest sorrow. It was obviously too far gone. He tried to light it anyway. We want to fight the dragon, don't we? Said Carrot. Farmo says, whatever. Life in the mountains for dwarfs / vz. In the Discworld so far, it's been dwarfs. It's not having no brook with none of that Tolkien nonsense. What are you looking at? Oh. Chucky say very much the Indiana Jones scene where his dad and others are looking sadly over a cliff to the fallen tank. Colon shifted uncomfortably. Where's that proctologist when you need him? I'm sorry. Yes, but aren't we allowed to go home for a change of clothes first? And a nice warm drink, said Nobby. And a meal, said Colin. A nice plate of... You should be ashamed of yourselves, said Carrot. There's a lady in distress, and a dragon to fight, and all you can think of is food and drink. Oh, I'm not just thinking about food and drink, said Colin. We could be all that stands between the city and total destruction. Yes, but... Nobby began. Carrot drew his sword and waved it over his head. What? I feel like Carrot just drew his sword twice. Didn't he already draw his sword? Let's see. Yeah. Said Carrot impatiently. He drew his sword. Come on, he said. And then Carrot drew his sword and waved it over his head. I don't think Carrot had two swords, so maybe he sheathed it and then drew it again for effect. Yeah, and Farmo's saying the same thing. Ah, Roakio. Maybe it's like cocking a gun in an action movie. Yeah, that's also kind of what I was thinking of. And then later, just anytime you get the chance. All right. Carrot drew his sword and waved it over his head. Captain Vimes would have gone, he said. All for one! He glared at them and rushed out of the yard. Colin gave Nobby a sheepish look. Young people today, he said. All for one what? Said Nobby. The sergeant sighed. Come on, then. Oh, all right. They staggered out into the alley. It was empty. Where'd he go? Said Nobby. Carrot stepped out of the shadows, grinning all over his face. Knew I could rely on you, he said. Follow me! Something odd about that boy, said Colin, as they limped after him. He always manages to persuade us to follow him. Have you noticed? All for one what? Said Nobby. Something about the voice, I reckon. Yes, but all for one what? The patrician sighed and, carefully marking his place, laid aside his book. To judge from the noise, there seemed to be an awful lot of excitement going on out there. It was highly unlikely any palace guards would be around, which was just as well. The guards were highly trained men, and it would be a shame to waste them. He would need them later on, He padded over to the wall and pushed a small block that looked exactly like all the other small blocks. No other small block, however, would have caused a section of flagstone to grind ponderously aside. There was a carefully chosen assortment of stuff in there. Iron rations, spare clothes, several small chests of precious metals and jewels, tools, and there was a key. Never build a dungeon you couldn't get out of. Sharky say, or when you're about to leave, so you take your keys out of your pocket, but then no one makes a move to leave, so you put them back. I see. The patrician took the key and strolled over to the door. As the wards of the lock slid back in their well-oiled grooves, he wondered, again, whether he should have told Vimes about the key. But the man seemed to have got so much satisfaction out of breaking out. It would have probably been positively bad for him to have told him about the key. Anyway, it would have spoiled his view of the world. He needed Vimes and his view of the world. Lord Vetinari swung the door open and, silently, strode out into the ruins of his palace. They trembled as, for the second time in a couple of minutes, the city rocked. The dragon kennels exploded. The windows blew out. The door left the wall ahead of a great billow of black smoke and sailed into the air, tumbling slowly to plow into the rhododendrons. Something very energetic and hot was happening in that building. More smoke poured out, thick and oily and solid. One of the walls folded in on itself, and then another one toppled sluggishly on the lawn. Swamp dragons shot determinedly out of the wreckage like champagne corks, wings whirring frantically. Sharky say, note, the narrator says it's the patrician's palace. Even the narrator sides with the patrician's authority. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Strode out into the ruins of his palace. Still the smoke unrolled. But there was something in there, some point of fierce white light that was gently rising. It disappeared from view as it passed a stricken window, and then, with a piece of roof tile still spinning on the top of his head, Errol climbed above his own smoke and ascended into the skies of Ankh-Morpork. The sunlight glinted off his silver scales as he hovered about 100 feet up, turning slowly, balancing nicely on his own flame. Vimes, awaiting death on the plaza, realized that his mouth was hanging open. He shut it again. There was absolutely no sound in the city now but the noise of Errol's ascent. They can rearrange their own plumbing, Vimes told himself bemusedly, to suit circumstances. He's made it work in reverse. But his thingies, his genes, surely he must have been halfway to it anyway. No wonder the little bugger has got such stubby wings. His body must have known he wasn't going to need them, except to steer. Good grief. I'm watching the first ever dragon to flame backwards. He risked a glance immediately above him. The great dragon was frozen, its enormous bloodshot eyes concentrating on the tiny creature. With a challenging roar of flame and a pummeling of air, the king of Ankh-Morpork rose, all thought of mere humans forgotten. Vimes turned sharply to Lady Ramkin. "How do they fight?" he said urgently. "How do dragons fight?" That is, well, they just flap at each other and blow flame," she said. "Swamp dragons, that is. I mean, who's ever seen a noble dragon fight?" She patted her nightie. "I must take some notes. I've got my memo book somewhere." "In your nightshirt?" "It's amazing how ideas come to one in bed, I've always said." Flames roared into the space where Errol had been, but he wasn't there. The king tried to spin in mid-air. The little dragon circled in an easy series of smoke rings, weaving a cat's cradle in the sky with the huge adversary gyrating helplessly in the middle. More flames, hotter and longer, stabbed at him and missed. The crowd watched in breathless silence. "Hello, Captain," said an ingratiating voice. Vimes looked down. A small and stagnant pond, disguised as Nobby, grinned sheepishly up at him. "I thought you were dead," he said. "We're not," said Nobby. "Oh. Good." There didn't seem much else to say. "What do you reckon on the fight, then?" Vimes looked back up. Smoke trails spiraled across the city. "I'm afraid it's not going to work," said Lady Ramkin. "Oh, hello, Nobby." "Afternoon, ma'am," said Nobby, touching what he thought was his forelock. "What do you mean, it's not going to work?" said Vimes. "Look at him go! He hasn't hit him yet." "Yes, but his flame has touched it several times. It doesn't seem to have any effect. It's not hot enough, I think. Oh, he's dodging well. But he's got to be lucky every time. It has only got to be lucky once." The meaning of this sank in. "You mean," said Vimes, "all this is just show? He's just doing it to impress?" "It's not his fault," said Colin, materializing behind them. "It's like dogs, innit? Doesn't really dawn on the poor little bugger that he's up against a big one. He's just ready for a scrap." Both dragons appeared to realize that the fight was the well-known Clatchian standoff. With another smoke ring and a billow of white flame, they parted and retreated a few hundred yards. The king hovered, flapping its wings quickly. Height. That was the thing. When dragon fought dragon, height was always the thing. Errol balanced on his flame. He seemed to be thinking. Then he nonchalantly kicked his back legs out, as though hovering on your own stomach gases was something dragons had mastered over millions of years, somersaulted, and fled. For a moment he was visible as a silver streak, and then he was out over the city walls and gone. A groan followed him. It came from 10,000 throats. Vimes threw up his hands. "Don't you worry, Gov," said Nobby quickly. He's probably gone to have a drink, or something. Maybe it's the underground one, or something." "I mean, he ate our kettle and everything," said Colin uncertainly. "He wouldn't just run away after eating a kettle. Stands to reason. Anyone who could eat a kettle wouldn't run away from anything." Parmo says jetpack dragon. Parmo says beautiful colon quote. Yep. Anyone who could eat a kettle wouldn't run away from anything. And my armor polish, said Carrot. It was nearly a whole $1 for the tin. There you are then, said Colin. It's like I said. Look, said Vimes, as patiently as he could manage. He's a nice dragon. I liked him as much as you. A very nice little chap. But he's just done the sensible thing, for God's sake. He's not going to get burned to bits just to save us. Life just doesn't work like that. You might as well face it. Overhead, the great dragon strutted through the air and flamed a nearby tower. It had won. I've never seen that before, said Lady Ramkin. Dragons normally fight to the death. At last they've bred one who's sensible, said Vimes morosely. Let's be honest. The chances of a dragon the size of Errol beating something that big are 1,000,000 to 1. There was one of those silences you get after one clear, bright note has been struck and the world pauses. The rank looked at one another. 1,000,000 to 1? asked Carrot nonchalantly. Definitely, said Vimes. 1,000,000 to 1. The rank looked at one another again. 1,000,000 to 1, said Colin. 1,000,000 to 1, agreed Nobby. That's right, said Carrot. 1,000,000 to 1. There was another high-toned silence. The members of the rank were wondering who was going to be the first to say it. Sergeant Colin took a deep breath. But it might just work, he said. There's so much set up for that. What are you talking about? Snapped Vimes. There's no... Nobby nudged him urgently in the ribs and pointed out across the plains. There was a column of black smoke out there. Vimes squinted. Running ahead of the smoke, speeding over the cabbage fields and closing fast, was a silvery bullet. My cabbages! The great dragon had seen it too. It flamed defiance and climbed for extra height, mashing the air with its enormous wings. Now Errol's flame was visible, so hot as to be almost blue. The landscape rolled away underneath him at an impossible speed, and he was accelerating. Ahead of him, the king extended its claws. It was almost grinning. Errol's going to hit it, Vimes thought. Gods help us all. It'll be a fireball. Something odd was happening out in the fields. A little way behind Errol, the ground appeared to be plowing itself up, throwing cabbage stalks into the air. My cabbages! A hedgerow erupted in a shower of sawdust. Errol passed silently over the city walls, nose up, wings folded down to tiny flaps, his body honed to a mere cone with a flame at one end. His opponent blew out a tongue of fire. Vimes watched Errol, with a barely noticeable flip of a wing stub, roll easily out of its path. And then he was gone, speeding out towards the sea in the same eerie silence. "He missed," Nobby began. The air ruptured. An endless thunderclap of noise dragged across the city, smashing tiles, toppling chimneys. In midair, the king was picked up, flattened out, and spun like a top in the sonic wash. Vimes, his hands over his own ears, saw the creature flame desperately as it turned and became the center of a spiral of crazy fire. Magic crackled along its wings. It screamed like a distressed foghorn. Then, shaking its head dazedly, it began to glide in a wide circle. Vimes groaned. It had survived something that tore masonry apart. What did you have to do to beat it? You can't fight it, he thought. You can't burn it, you can't smash it. There's nothing you can do to it. The dragon landed. It wasn't a perfect landing. A perfect landing wouldn't have demolished a row of cottages. It was slow, and it seemed to go on for a long time and rip up a considerable stretch of the city. Wings flapped aimlessly, neck waving and spraying random flame. It plowed on through a debris of beams and thatch. Several fires started up along the trail of destruction. Finally, it came to rest at the end of the furrow, almost invisible under a heap of former architecture. The silence that it left was broken only by the shouts of someone trying to organize yet another bucket chain from the river to douse the fires. Sharky say thatched-roofed cottages? It's hard to tell. They've been burninated. Oh, we've got a spammer. Asking to buy followers. And gone. Banned by Farmhouse. Nice. Haven't had one of those for a while. Then people started to move. From the air, Ankh-Morpork must have looked like a disturbed anthill, with streams of dark figures flowing towards the wreck of the dragon. Most of them had some kind of weapon. Many of them had spears. Some of them had swords. All of them had one aim in mind. "You know what?" said Vimes aloud. "This is going to be the world's first democratically killed dragon. One man, one stab." "Then you've got to stop them. You can't let them kill it," said Lady Ramkin. Vimes blinked at her. "Pardon?" he said. "It's wounded." "Lady, that was the intention, wasn't it? Anyway, it's only stunned," said Vimes. "I mean, you can't let them kill it like this," said Lady Ramkin insistently. "Poor thing." "What do you want to do, then?" demanded Vimes, his temper unraveling. "Give it a strengthening dose of tar oil and a nice comfy basket in front of the stove?" "It's butchery." "Suits me fine." "But it's a dragon. It's just doing what a dragon does. It never would have come here if people had left it alone. Vimes thought, it was about to eat her, and she can still think like this. He hesitated. Perhaps that did give you the right to an opinion. Sergeant Colin sidled up as they glared, white-faced, at one another, and hopped desperately from one squelching foot to the other. "You'd better come at once, Captain," he said. "It's going to be a bloody murder." Vimes waved a hand at him. "As far as I'm concerned," he mumbled, avoiding Sybil Ramkin's glare, "it's got it coming to it." "It's not that," said Colin. "It's Carrot. He's arrested the dragon." Vimes paused. Farmo says Caesar style. Yeah, that's right. Caesar style dragon. "What do you mean, arrested?" he said. "You don't mean what I think you mean, do you?" "Could be, sir," said Colin, uncertainly. "Could be. He was up on the rubble like a shot, sir. Grabbed it by a wing and said, 'You're nicked, chummy.' Sir. Couldn't believe it, sir. Sir, the thing is—" "Well?" The sergeant hopped from one foot to the other. "You know, you said prisoners weren't to be molested, sir." It was quite a large and heavy roof timber, and it scythed quite slowly through the air. But when it hit people, they rolled backwards and stayed hit. "Now look," said Carrot, hauling it in and pushing back his helmet. "I don't want to have to tell anyone again, right?" Vimes shouldered his way through the dense crowd, staring at the bulky figure atop the mound of rubble and dragon. Carrot turned slowly, the roof beam held like a staff. His gaze was like a lighthouse beam. Where it fell, the crowd lowered their weapons and looked merely sullen and uncomfortable. "I must warn you," Carrot went on, "that interfering with an officer in the execution of his duty is a serious offense, and I shall come down like a ton of bricks on the very next person who throws a stone." A stone bounced off the back of his helmet. There was a barrage of jeers. "Let us at it! That's right! We don't want guards ordering us about! Quis custodiet custard! Yeah, right!" Quis custodiet custard. It was phrased as a question. There's a question mark at the end. Just in the middle there. Vimes pulled the sergeant towards him. "Go and organize some rope. Lots of rope. As thick as possible. I suppose we can, tie its wings together maybe and bind up its mouth so it can't flame." Colin peered at him. "Are you serious, sir? We're really going to arrest it?" "Do it." It's been arrested, he thought, as he pushed his way forward. Personally, I would have preferred it to drop in the sea, but it's been arrested, and now we've got to deal with it, or let it go free. He felt his own feelings about the bloody thing evaporate in the face of the mob. What could you do with it? Give it a fair trial, he thought, and then execute it. Not kill it. That's what heroes do out in the wilderness. You can't think like that in cities. Or rather, you can, but if you're going to, then you might as well burn the whole place down right now and start again. You ought to do it, well, by the book. That's it. We tried everything else. Now we might as well try and do it by the book. Anyway, he added mentally, that's a city guard up there. We've got to stick together. Nobody else will have anything to do with us. A burly figure in front of him drew back an arm with a half-brick in it. Throw that brick, and you're a dead man, said Vimes, and then ducked and pushed his way through the press of people, while the would-be thrower looked around in amazement. Pharma says, who watches the Watchmen, but in really bad Latin. Custard. Carrot half raised his club in a threatening gesture as Vimes climbed up the rubble pile. Oh, hello, Captain Vimes, he said, lowering it. I have to report I have arrested this. Yes, I can see, said Vimes. Did you have any suggestions about what we do next? Oh, yes, sir. I have to read it its rights, sir, said Carrot. I mean, apart from that. Not really, sir. Vimes looked at those parts of the dragon still visible under the rubble. How could you kill one of these? You'd have to spend a day at it. A lump of rock ricocheted off his breastplate. Who did that? The voice lashed out like a whip. Oh, wrong voice. Let me go back. It's tricky reading this out loud, is that I don't always know who's speaking. A lump of rock ricocheted off his breastplate. Who did that? There we go. The voice lashed out like a whip. The crowd went quiet. Sybil Ramkin scrambled up on the wreckage, eyes afire, and glared furiously at the mob. I said, she said, who did that? If the person who did it does not own up, I shall be extremely angry. Shame on you all. She had their full attention. Several people holding stones and things let them drop quietly to the ground. The breeze flapped the remnants of her nightshirt as her ladyship took up a new haranguing position. Here is the gallant Captain Vimes. Oh, gods, said Vimes in a small voice, and pulled his helmet down over his eyes. And his dauntless men, who have taken the trouble to come here today to save your... Vimes gripped Carrot's arm and maneuvered him down the far side of the heap. You all right, Captain? Said the Lance Constable. You've gone all red. Don't you start, snapped Vimes. It's bad enough getting all those leers from Nobby and the sergeant. To his astonishment, Carrot patted him companionably on the shoulder. I know how it is, he said sympathetically. I had this girl back home. Her name was Minty, and her father... Look, for the last time, there is absolutely nothing between, Vimes began. There was a rattle beside them. A small avalanche of plaster and thatch rolled down. The rubble heaved and opened one eye. One big black pupil, floating in a bloodshot glow, tried to focus on them. We must be mad, said Vimes. Oh, no, sir, said Carrot. There's plenty of precedents. In 1135, a hen was arrested for crowing on Soul Cake Thursday, and during the regime of psychoneurotic Lord Snapcase, a colony of bats was executed for persistent curfew violations. That was in 1401. August, I think. Great days for the law they were, said Carrot dreamily. In 1321, you know, a small cloud was prosecuted for covering the sun during the climax of frenzied Earl Hargath's investiture ceremony. I hope Colin gets a move on with... Vimes stopped. He had to know. How? He said. What can you do to a cloud? Sharky say psychoneurotic Lord Snapcase is an amazing name. I feel like Lord Snapcase gets mentioned a few times in various books. What can you do to a cloud? The Earl sentenced it to be stoned to death, said Carrot. Apparently, 31 people were killed. Yep. He pulled out his notebook and glared at the dragon. Pharma says, oof, that's the one that got me and the one that got her, snorting away in the other room. Sharky say, when old man yells at cloud, goes too far. Duh. He pulled out his notebook and glared at the dragon. Can it hear us, do you think? He said. I suppose so. Well, then. Carrot cleared his throat and turned back to the stunned reptile. It is my duty to warn you that you are to be reported for consideration of prosecution on some or all of the following counts, to wit, 1. I, that on or about 18th Groon last, in a place known as Sweetheart Lane, the Shades, you did unlawfully vent flame in a manner likely to cause grievous bodily harm, in contravention of Clause 7 of the Industrial Processes Act 1508, and that 1. I, that on or about 18th Groon last, in a place known as Sweetheart Lane, the Shades, you caused, or did cause, to cause the death of 6 persons unknown. Vimes wondered how long the rubble would hold the creature down. Several weeks would be necessary if the length of the charge sheet was anything to go by. The crowd went silent. Even Sybil Ramkin was standing in astonishment. That was a squeaky little bark. What's the matter? Said Vimes to the upturned faces. Haven't you ever seen a dragon being arrested before? 16-3, I, on the night of 24th Groon last, you did flame or cause to flame those premises known as the Old Watch House, Ankh-Morpork, valued at $200, and that 16-3, I, on the night of 24th Groon last, upon being apprehended by an officer of the watch in the execution of his duty. I think we should hurry up, whispered Vimes. It's getting rather restive. Is all this necessary? Well, I believe one can summarize, said Carrot, in exceptional circumstances, according to Bregg's rules for... It may come as a surprise, but these are exceptional circumstances, Carrot, said Vimes. And they're going to be really astonishingly exceptional if Colin doesn't hurry up with that rope. Sharkies say a tin of polish is worth $1 and a whole watch house is only worth $200. It wasn't in the best shape, I guess. And who knows on when that valuation was taken. That price might be as old as his book. More rubble moved as the dragon strained to get up. There was a thump as a heavy beam was shouldered aside. The crowd began to run for it. It was at this point that Errol came back over the rooftops in a series of minor explosions, leaving a trail of smoke rings. Dipping low, he buzzed the crowd and sent the front rank stumbling backwards. He was also wailing like a foghorn. Vimes grabbed Carrot and stumbled down the heap as the king started to scrabble desperately to get free. "He's come back for the kill!" he shouted. "It probably took him all this time just to slow down." Sharky say Vancouver real estate levels now worth $3 million. Teardown condition. Yeah. Bennebic. Bennebon Bean. That got his attention. Finger licking good. Now, Errol was hovering over the fallen dragon, and hooting shrilly enough to burst bottles. The great dragon stuck its head up in a cascade of plaster dust. It opened its mouth, but, instead of the lance of white fire that Vimes tensed himself to expect, it merely made a noise like a kitten. Admittedly, a kitten shouting into a tin bath at the bottom of a cave, but still a kitten. Broken spars fell aside when the huge creature got unsteadily to its feet. The great wings opened, showering the surrounding streets with dust and bits of thatch. Some of it clanged off the helmet of Sergeant Colin, hurrying back with what looked like a small washing line coiled over his arm. "You're letting it get up!" Vimes shouted, pushing the sergeant to safety. "You're not supposed to let it get up, Errol! Don't let it get up!" Lady Ramkin frowned. "That's not right," she said. "They never usually fight like that. The winner usually kills the loser." "Right on!" shouted Nobby. "And then, half the time, he explodes with the excitement in any case." "Look, it's me!" Vimes yelled, as Harrell hovered unconcernedly over the scene. "I bought you the fluffy ball! The one with the bell in it! You can't do this to us!" "No, wait a minute," said Lady Ramkin, laying a hand on his arm. "I'm not sure we haven't got hold of the wrong end of the stick here." The great dragon leapt into the air and brought its wings down with a whump that flattened a few more buildings. The huge head swung around. The bleary eyes caught sight of Vimes. There seemed to be some thought going on inside them. Errol arced across the sky and hovered protectively in front of the captain, facing the thing down. For a moment, it looked as though he might be turned into a small flying charcoal biscuit. And then the dragon lowered its gaze in a slightly embarrassed way and started to rise. It climbed in a wide spiral, gathering speed as it did so. Errol went with it, orbiting the huge body like a tug around a liner. It's as though he's fussing over it, said Vimes. Add up the bastard, shouted Nobby enthusiastically. Total, Nobby, said Colin. You mean total. Vimes felt Lady Ramkin's gaze on the back of his neck. He looked at her expression. Realization dawned. Oh, he said. Lady Ramkin nodded. Really? Said Vimes. Yes, she said. I really ought to have thought of it before. It was such a hot flame, of course, and they're always so much more territorial than the males. Why don't you fight the bastard? Shouted Nobby at the dwindling dragons. Bitch, Nobby, said Vimes quietly. Not bastard. Bitch. Why don't you fight? What? It's a member of the female gender, explained Lady Ramkin. What? We meant that if you tried your favorite kick, Nobby, it wouldn't work, said Vimes. It's a girl, translated Lady Ramkin. But it's sodding enormous, said Nobby. Vimes coughed urgently. Nobby's rodent eyes slid sideways to Sybil Ramkin, who blushed like a sunset. A fine figure of a dragon, I mean, he said quickly. Wide, egg-bearing hips, said Sergeant Colin anxiously. Statue skew, added Nobby fervently. Statue skew. Shut up, said Vimes. He brushed the dust off the remains of his uniform, adjusted the hang of his breastplate, and set his helmet on squarely. He patted it firmly. This wasn't where it ended, he knew that. This was where it all got started. You men, come with me. Come on, hurry, while everyone's still watching them, he added. But what about the king? Said Carrot. Or queen, whatever it is now. Vimes stared at the rapidly shrinking shapes. I really don't know, he said. That's up to Errol, I suppose. We've got other things to do. Colin saluted, still fighting for breath. Where are we going, sir? He managed. To the palace. Any of you still got a sword? You can use mine, Captain, said Carrot. He handed it over. Right, said Vimes quietly. He glared at them. Let's go. It's 20 after 8. Wow. It's later than I thought. Farmer says statuesque, or was it spelled differently? And Sharky say, yep, spelled statue skew. Yeah, this was Nobby we're talking about. All right, page 379. I think that on Friday we're going to finish this book. Sound good? chair's so creaky. Good news, though. We 2+ years ago, we ordered a custom-built table from this guy in Alberta, and he's given us all kinds of excuses and things and whatnot, and it's taken forever. But he has just sent us pictures of it nearly completed, and he says he thinks it might be done within a week, so I think maybe it'll be done before the end of the year. And so that's going to go over in our D&D room. Oh, I've got the pictures. I guess I could show the primary picture of it. I can unlock my phone. There we go. Let's see. Which way will display better? This is our table, nearly finished. It's made out of hard maple, dark stain. That inset bit's going to have a felt lining. I don't know whether the inside of the drawers is going to get stained at all or anything, or if they're going to have any lining, but those are for, people to keep their character sheets and things. Was there a cabbage reference we missed somewhere? Have you not watched Avatar: The Last Airbender? You can see all the cup holders built into the edges there. And the inside of the drawers each have power outlets with USB ports as well. So we'll be able to plug in the table, and then everyone's going to have their own, charge ports and things like that. I think that your whole family would very much enjoy Avatar: The Last Airbender. I highly recommend it. It's great. It's you don't need to worry about subtitles. It's all in English. The original voice acting. It's not an anime specifically. It's similar to an anime, but it's North American. The writing's great. The humor is great. It's got a lot of good moral lessons, I think. So but there's a certain cabbage merchant in that show, which is why I was screaming about cabbages. Anyways, our table. So the reason I mentioned that is because my chair, I've mentioned before, is currently kind of locked in our temporary setup over there. But once we have our actual table in place, then we're going to buy chairs to go around that. We're going to properly furnish it, and I'll be able to have my computer chair back. Yeah. So, yes, I think that's a good place to call it. And I'm seeing that our friend Lily is currently streaming New World. So I'm going to raid out to Lily, I think, just as a courtesy. I think that's a good way to end tonight. And then we'll be back here on Friday, and we'll finish this book. Should work. Okay, have a good night, everyone. I'll see you Friday. Bye.